hope you'll continue listening to the podcast episodes. I'm your host, Matthew Halderman, and each week we're going to dive into a different piece of content, film and television, and we're going to talk with some of the biggest names in front of and behind the camera as we dive deep into how they were financed, produced, developed, marketed, and the crazy stories behind how many of them got made. Welcome back to another episode of Greenlit. On today's episode, we're talking with Jeff Sackman. Jeff's the first president of Lionsgate Films, and then went on to found another company called Think Film, which produced pictures like Spellbound and Murderball. And he's currently the co-founder of a company called Quiver Distribution. BondIt Media Capital and Buffalo 8 have worked with Jeff and his partner Barry Meyerowitz a number of times over the years on a film called Social Animals, as well as on a new film with Kevin James and Joel McHale called Becky. Join me in the conversation, without further ado, with my friend and colleague, Jeff Sackman. Welcome back to Greenlit. Today I'm talking with a friend and a colleague, Jeff Sackman. So first up, Jeff, thanks for joining in what appears to be the jungle.
That's where I'm calling you from. Thanks, Matt. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you as well. I know we're going to frame this primarily around American Psycho, which we also spoke with your colleague, Mike Pasternak, about. And Mike had an amazing deep dive and backstory on that piece of content. But I know your angle into it is quite different. And yeah. I think also take us through not only how was it greenlit, but also those early days of Lionsgate, and then how important that was to those early days of Lionsgate.
Great, thanks. You know, it's interesting because 20 years has passed, and of course you speak to everybody, even if we were all in the same room, and even if we were not particularly glory seekers. We had a great team where we actually operated as a team and no one was looking for self-credit. But in the passage of time, everyone remembers the stories differently. And if you look at some of the credits of American Psycho, you'll see different familiar names, Chris Hanley. And so Ed Pressman had the rights to the film or to the book and had been trying, from my recollection of the story, is and had been trying for a number of years to get it made. And it came across our desk, and Mike was head of production. I was running Lionsgate Films. Joe Drake was head of international, and we operated as a true partnership. And we saw this and went, let's do it. It just seemed like a no-brainer. And only over time did you realize what the backstory and all the stops and starts it had. And I think that was one of the fundamental philosophies of us which we adopted from Andre Link and John Dunning, who were the owners of CFP, which is what became the base of Lionsgate, which is if you want to do something, you just do it. And you support each other. And if it doesn't go well, you don't point fingers. So, you know, we got our hands on the material. Mary Herron was already attached. I believe Christian Bale was already attached. And it was going to be about a $7 million budget. And we're going back to the days of, the good old days of territorial sales, where every country in the world had its own unique distribution, independent film infrastructure. And this film had a decent profile, and we just believed we could sell enough to finance it and make it work. And we never really turned back. And there were, some great stories along the way, which I'm sure we'll get into. The Leonardo DiCaprio phase, which was phenomenal, fascinating, and something I'm very proud of and have used as a reference in numerous dealings in life, which is, you could go down a path and you could deviate from the path. And if the deviation doesn't lead to the pot of gold or the rainbow that you expected, you can actually go back and get on the original path and keep going. And American Psycho with Mary Herron and Christian Bale was that.
So walk us through, Mike Pasternak in the other episode, we chatted with him. He noted, Titanic comes out, Leo's the biggest name in the world. You guys go to, I believe, Rick Yorn and make an offer. And the goal is try and get him attached. I like your lesson that you've taken away from it. And for those that don't know you, you're very much a reflective person and you're very much a contemplative person. But walk us through more of that story as well and the part that you took away from it.
So it came with, as I said, these attachments. Christian Bale was recognized in the industry as a high-quality actor. He was not the Christian Bale of today. So we were going ahead, planning to make the film, and one of us had a brainwave. And at that time, I think there was an announcement in the trades that Tom Cruise had $20 million salary. That was the highest salary anybody ever had. So we said, well, why don't we offer $21 million to Leonardo DiCaprio? He's coming off of Titanic, was the biggest thing in the world. It was a lark. Mike did what he did. He was in Rick Yorn's office, dropped the script, had a chat. The next thing you know, they say, yeah, he wants to do it. This is going to be his first film after Titanic. We go, and we had literally, this is probably 1997, and we had literally sold CFP into what became Lionsgate. Lionsgate had capital for a change and was this kind of cool happening indie company. We had Buffalo 66 that year. We had another film at Sundance. It was a hot film. So we were like kind of this cool indie company. And we couldn't, of course, announce Leonardo DiCaprio. It was a whole to-do. And we're real indie guys. We're not part of this Hollywood world where agents and managers have, of major stars. We're not dealing with those guys at that time. So long and short, we go to Cannes. We're selling American Psycho, and we want to announce this in Cannes. So this would have been May of 97 or 98. And we needed all the approvals in order to make the announcement. We wanted to make the announcement at the beginning of the festival. So I remember the scrambling, going to see Rick Yorn and the back and forth with the publicist and the press release. And this was a pre-internet days. So the trades were critical, and the trades in Cannes, 3 big trades come out every morning in every hotel lobby. And we finally got the approval on whatever night it was, a Sunday night, a Monday night. And the next morning, the headline in Variety is Leonardo DiCaprio to star in American Psycho. So this is us on the front line. So Joe's there running our sales operation. I'm there running around. And suddenly we're celebrities. People are coming up all over the place. To me, I was on a panel that day with Saul Zaentz and Amir Malin and a bunch of industry. The whole panel was oriented towards Leonardo DiCaprio in American Psycho. Wasn't the topic. And while I'm doing that, Joe's sitting in his office fielding offers, which by the end of the day totaled $63 million. $63 million of foreign sales in one day. Japan, $9 million, Italy, $9 million, etc. $63 million, which is pretty much what the peak of a big film could do on a territory by territory basis. And that doesn't include North America. We said, we're not going to do anything in North America. We figured, we had a rough calculation that it would cost about $40 million to make the film with Leo's 21, et cetera, et cetera. So now that's May. We're exalting in all of our glory. Joe's taking his offers, signing the deals. And now we get back home, and you actually need to show up on set one day and start shooting. But now we're in Hollywood land. So Leonardo DiCaprio is not going to work with Mary Harron. Who's that? He wants to approve the director. And now the game begins. So 3-4 months of Mike running around, and it's Oliver Stone, and I forget who all the people were. In the meantime, we hear stories that not only is Mary pissed and upset, but Christian Bale had worked out for 18 months to get, and we've all seen what he's done with his body for roles, which is just staggering. And as you've seen in American Psycho, as it turned out. So anyway, so this thing is going on through the summer. And, a little tidbit side story for me is at the Toronto Film Festival that September, Christian Bale was the star of a Jeremy Thomas directed film called All the Little Animals. And we were the distributors. And I'm running the distribution company. And there's a dinner. And who do I sit next to? Christian Bale. Does Christian Bale know that I'm the guy who purportedly did this whole Leonardo thing? And it was still up in the air. It still hadn't, simmered down yet. And so it never came up in conversation, so I'm hoping he never knew. But anyway, so long and short of it, we got together at some point, meaning Mike, Joe, and myself, and said, in effect, we're on this roller coaster to nowhere. And it may happen, it may not happen, but we have no control over it at this point. And there were so many loose ends and so many uncertainties. And then the beach came along, and I think he committed to that. And we just said, you know what, let's get back on the path and let's make the film that was supposed to be made. And we did, and shot the film that fall in Toronto. And it's still incredible to me what a sensation it is 20 years later. And as you know, and as I was telling you before, we could talk about the distribution and release a little bit, but as I was telling you before, what amazed me about this film, I didn't necessarily relate to it myself. I related to the marketing and commercial impact of it. Is that a young investment banker kid came up to me about 10 years ago, and he wanted my autograph on a DVD. And I said, what? He said, you don't understand. This is the most important film to guys like me of my generation. And I looked at him and said, why? It just astounds me to this day. And another little tidbit of, not quite getting all of this was, the most memorable or referenced scene, and then I'll go a little off color for another story, but the most memorable or referenced scene is the business card.
Yep.
And we're sitting in the theater in Sundance, the biggest, hottest premiere, the buzz and the people and the noise and the excitement. And we get into the theater and the film starts and the business card scene comes up and the place is uproarious. And I look at Joe and Joe looks at me and we both go, I don't get it. They were going crazy over the fact that they were discussing the depth of the business card. So it's pretty incredible. But a little bit of the off color is on the drive to the theater that night. We had a big van, and I was driving, and there were about 8 people in the van, including some actors from Toronto. And okay, she's in the film. Like, okay. And then put 2 and 2 together, and what was she in the film? She was in the threesome as the non-speaking recipient of tongues where most people don't think tongues belong. And I then created this backstory in my mind about here she is in Toronto and her parents and the family and the neighbors. And she's going to I have a film in Sundance. I'm going to Sundance because I have a film in oh, what film? Americans say, oh, I heard it's a big film. What part do you play? I'm the tongue recipient. So, and somewhere in a comedian's mind is a phenomenal consolidation of that's Hollywood in that story.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, I love it. I mean, obviously, what year did the film come out? Was it 99 or is it
99? And 99. The day the film came out, so the buzz continued, right? And the film comes out and we get the afternoon grosses. And remember, we're a smallish independent company and we don't have big results on a regular basis. So when you get big results, you get excited. And the film comes out and the first showings are sold out in New York and LA, and it's huge. And I'm like off the, just jumping up and down, and we got a hit on our hands. It's going to be great. We're going to So I have a friend of mine and a fellow distributor whose name I won't mention. And I call him up and, we're doing what we normally do. And it's like, this is going through the roof. This is unbelievable. It's relax. It's New York and LA. It's not St. Louis. So we made a bet. And the bet was $15 million box office, $100 per million on either side of it. And I ended up having to write a check for $300. So with all the noise and all the excitement and all the success, it grossed $12 million.
Right.
And it played like a really successful art film.
Right. But then, I asked when it came out because I think what's really interesting about the interview with you in particular. So I was 12 years old or 13 years old when this movie came out. And those early teenage years, this movie was very much an off-limits thing as a 12 or 13-year-old. But it was this movie that I remember where I saw it. I was in a friend's basement who had an older brother, and it was home video, home DVD, and seeing the film and knowing that my parents were in finance, but we sort of grew up outside of the sort of bro-y culture of investment banking. Like that was never really the vibe I got from it. And that was the first time I feel like I watched something that took me years, eons beyond how old I was. But what's interesting about your career is that, so that was sort of this early touchstone of, I would say another film would be like a Fight Club, where it sort of just totally captured a moment in time, and will always be that moment in time for so many people. Yeah. But then you were president of Lionsgate Films.
Yeah.
You then transitioned to Think Film. And the reason that's really relevant to me and the sort of linear where I want to sort of take the next step of this, you always had this entrepreneurial scrappiness with what Lionsgate was, and which your colleague Mike Pasternak said the same thing, was you guys never thought like a studio. You thought like you did, there's that great Jeff Bezos quote, every day is day one. And if you can instill that in the culture of the way people think, you can build a really interesting company. You go and do Think Film. And you did a movie, you did several movies there, but this film, Spellbound, which I doubt it's going to be this huge thing that tons of people listening or watching this are going to immediately recognize.
I think you'd be surprised. It captured a different zeitgeist, and it's amazing how well known it is.
Yeah. So I was a freshman in high school in Connecticut, in an area where being in finance is what you do, not being in entertainment, not being involved in anything other than being a quantitative thinker. And I had this freshman year English professor, teacher, not a professor, and he had 3 posters on the wall of our English classroom. And one of them was an Amelie poster, which I had obviously never heard of. One of them was a Rushmore poster, which I had obviously never heard of. And the other was a Spellbound poster. And the Spellbound poster was this poster that looked like it came out of a festival. There was a one sheet from a festival screening. And he was really my introduction into, I loved music, and my parents were incredibly supportive about being into the arts and being into the history of it and the whole thing. But the idea to sort of dive into the subculture of the explosion of what was happening in independent content, your career really tracked that. And it's interesting that now, being friends with you and having worked with you, knowing that you were really a critical mover in that, first with Lionsgate, then into Think Film. How did that transition happen? And then how did Spellbound happen as well?
So thanks, Matt. It's funny because we all see ourselves a certain way and others see us a different way. And I've always lived in Canada, but recognized that the US was the market. So effectively I functioned as an American. I used to have a line that said something like, we're located in Canada, we think like Americans, and we behave globally. So, I always saw, and we broke into U.S. distribution in 94. We were a very small company. We'd been distributing Miramax in Canada. That was the lifeblood of the company, and they pulled it from us and gave it to our competitors because they paid a lot more money. They had just gone public. And so we were kind of stuck, and I said, well, let's just go and distribute in the States. It's the same fundamentals. And over the years, we realized, and I did it a couple of times and doing it again now, that, having your head office operation in Canada to distribute in the States is a very economically sound and also ideologically sound approach to this business. You don't get people who are caught up in the non-business parts of the business. So a lot less partying and a lot less, silliness and quite frankly, a lot fewer places to go to get another job.
You were never going to be a recipient of one of those tongues.
No. Well said. So I was always kind of, because of my proximity and because I never bought into the, recognition that publicity is a form of value and a form of currency, and self-publicizing and self-aggrandizing was not my particular strength. People said to me back in those days that you're referring to, it's like, doesn't Mark Gurman work for you? Doesn't Tom Ortenberg work for you? Why do I read about them all the time and I don't read about you? And I was like, it's just not my thing. So, and again, it's all like, it's you can look back and say should have, could have done things some differently, but very comfortable doing it the way I did. Stay out of the mainstream in living in Toronto, operate in the territory that is the most lucrative in the United States, manage it like a business, manage your costs, etc. So Lionsgate changed. John Feldheimer and Michael Burns effectively took it over, and they were great to me. They made me a couple of wonderful offers to come down to the States and to LA, or to take over the Canadian operation and joint venture it with them. And both of those may have been okay, but I wanted to do my own thing. And so I had the opportunity to start Think Film. And the idea of Think Film was just to be another scrappy independent, with the motto effectively being, we do not have the capital to compete for advertising, for bigger movies. We have to have the smarts to compete by, what I just used to call cutting through. And so it's edgy films that generate publicity in and of themselves. And it's provocative films. So when you look at, Spellbound, that was one, which I'll get to in a second, but, Aristocrats and Short Bus and Murder Ball, like these were all titles and films that had cut through potential. And, and I'll use your question about Spellbound and sort of balance it with Murder Ball. So Spellbound was playing at the Toronto Film Festival. We were just starting the company. It was 2001. It was our first festival, and we saw it and liked it. And I don't remember what we paid for it. I'm sure it wasn't much. There was no big documentary. It sort of launched the docs as a regular, normal theatrical film.
Yeah. And
Spellbound played like an intense edge-of-your-seat drama, even though it was based on a knowable outcome. But it was just put together in such a fantastic way, and there's been numerous films that have followed that format subsequently. So we didn't know that we had anything special. It just was a pure word of mouth, kept on getting better and bigger, and ultimately grossed like $5-6 million. But it really put not only us on the map, but we then determined to go into the doc business in a more meaningful way. And with a mixed bag of results. One of my favorite reference stories is Born into Brothels, which won the Oscar for Best Picture, which was a great documentary. And it had as a sub-theme photography. The woman who planted herself in the brothel world, why would anybody from the first world want to do that with their time is beyond me. The conditions were so horrific. But she was a photographer and decided to spend 7 years of her life and ultimately got the Oscar. So we're marketing the film. It goes out, it does what it does, and we're doing in the DVD time. And we do a deal with Ritz Cameras, which was the biggest chain of camera stores, 1,300 stores. There's a photography theme to this movie. It won an Oscar. At every Ritz camera store, there was a 12-pack by the cash register. And we had a deal with them. They would stay up there. They would only pay what sold. It would stay up there for 12 weeks. So we needed to sell one copy per store per week. And we took back 2/3 of the units.
Wow.
So that really hammered home the idea of theoretical marketing versus practical consumption.
Right.
And, it's like, we got the photography stores. It's the only DVD in the store. It's only $20. You're buying a $500 camera. We sold 1/3 in 12 weeks. Yeah. So that's an aside. So Spellbound was a great experience. Murder Ball was a great experience with a devastatingly not great outcome. Because that documentary might have changed the world in so many positive ways, and something just didn't click. So this would be an example. You could do everything right, and the forces that be conspire against you, and the forces are not physical forces. Murder Ball, we did perfect on every front. Saw 4-minute clip of the film. They needed another $400,000 to finish the movie. Very dedicated filmmaker, been doing it for 2 years, running around the world, ran out of cash. We did the deal. We gave them $400,000 overnight. We sold it to A&E for $350,000. So we were nicely covered. The film gets finished. It's phenomenal. Seat of your pants, gripping, similar format to Spellbound in that there's a contest that you root for, and it's a historical known outcome, and it doesn't actually matter. And we play the film at Sundance, but we did a brilliant marketing stunt first, which is we showed it to all the volunteers 2 or 3 days before the festival started. So as people were coming in, all anyone was talking about was Murderball. And I was walking around with the star, Mark Zupan, in Sundance, and I said it was like being with Mick Jagger. You couldn't walk 3 feet without people stopping him. It was incredible. And the film plays, and it's a sensation. World premiere, Roger Ebert declares that we may as well stop the documentary vote right now. This is Best Picture, hands down. I get accosted in the parking lot by Sheila Nevins, who ran HBO's documentary business. We had offered it to HBO. They passed. And she berated the crap out of me for not selling it to them. Sorry, we sold it when we sold it. It could have sold for a lot more money had we waited.
Yeah.
And the marketing, the publicity, everything was phenomenal. 3-page spread in Entertainment Weekly, American Disability Association supporting and endorsing the film. The same year that they were not happy with $1 Million Baby for reasons in the film, their 11 million strong organization, we had all sorts of stuff going, and the film didn't work, and March of the Penguins came along and won the Oscar. Wow. So we grossed $2 million at the box office. I would have bet it would have done 20. And and to this day, that's my biggest career disappointment, because the potential, everything was right, and you look back and you think, what did we do wrong? Murderball? Is that an off-putting title? Is disability having anything to do with a film off-putting to people both with or without disability? And as compelling as the lead character was, if you saw his image, he looks like a skinhead. Mm-hmm. And so with him as the front face of the poster in the campaign, was that a turn-off? So there's the bookends with Spellbound. Yeah. 2 great movies. One worked brilliantly, one failed. I wouldn't say it failed miserably, because on a business basis, it just failed miserably on a expectation. Yeah.
So how long? I have a couple questions on Think Film, but how long was that run? Because I know you sold it sort of just probably at the sort of just the right time, given where the world turned in 2008. Yeah. What was that run like, and what led up to that sale?
So I'll preface it with another perspective that I had over the years, as I just read. Aviron Pictures went down. Their president, or guy who founded it, just got arrested. I've always said I wish that when I started in 1985, and I was the distributor in Canada for most of the American companies at the time, Canon Pictures, Goldwyn, all these companies. And I remember thinking it would be interesting to have a chart of distribution companies in the States that when did they start, how long did they go, and when did they end. And I think that list today, from the time I started, would be 150 long. Goldwyn is still around. Sony Classics wasn't then, it was Orion Classics. But it's incredible how many companies come and go. And if you wanted to take it, if you and I were sitting in your office chatting the way we do, and wanted to imagine how much money went through all of these distribution companies and disappeared into the great unknown. So, so Think Film, was another undercapitalized company. It's almost impossible to be properly capitalized. You either, you just have to have either access to a lot of money and you piss it away, or you stay really small. There was a company called Strand Releasing. I remember they were around for quite some time. They may still be.
I think they still are. Yeah.
Yeah. So small, niche, operate from self-generated revenue and just stay at that level. Then you could possibly exist. I think Roadside Attractions is a very impressive, sustainable story.
Yep.
And it's a testimony to the guys who run it and how they run it. They just stay within your lane. So Think Film, we had ambition, and part of it I think is reflects my views on life. But I'm an entrepreneur. I like the movie business. I think we could do some really cool, interesting marketing, publicity, and find those films that other people won't touch. As I mentioned earlier, Aristocrats, Short Bus. When I saw a cut of the Aristocrats in the editor's screening room, I said, there's not anyone else who's going to touch this film. This could change our game. We're our highest grossing film. So, the idea of Think Film, and then the other thing I said, and we raised some money for Think Film, but not a lot, a few $1 million. And I remember doing the pitch, and I said, the concept of a distribution company is you have to stick around long enough for one of two events, a hit or a sale, or you're going to fail, period. Unless you're those examples of the guys who just stay at their level and, we're going to be big, they're not looking to be big. So the hit or the sale. And Think Film, we never got the hit. We had a couple of nice little pop, Spellbound, and we also had a video company called Avalanche Home Entertainment, which I coined the brilliant copy line for. It's all downhill from here. And it was just pure exploitation, straight to video product, but that actually kept us alive. So again, we weren't just into the movie business. We had the theatrical team but we also had the business guys who understood the video is what kept us afloat. You can make real money. Yeah. P&A will kill you.
Yeah, you got to eat short term to live long term.
Perfect. So that was the philosophy, and we set it up right from the beginning. And the other thing is, I think Film was set up as a build it to sell it concept from day one, because you can't sustain. I just have that chart in my head. If it was ever created, if all those companies could only last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and collapse, you can't sustain.
Right.
Miramax was on the verge of collapse, and they sold to Disney. Right. So they were the best. New Line couldn't sustain. They sold to Turner, which ultimately became Warner's. Right. So it's, October Films, Artisan, nobody could sustain, no matter how big they looked in the industry.
Right.
No matter, how fancy the rooms they took at Cannes or Milan or wherever our festivals took us. So, it's a tricky business. Startup costs, overhead costs, acquisition or production costs, marketing costs, all against some unknowable revenue stream. So Think Film, did what it set out to do, either get a hit or get sold. So, after 5 years, we just said, feels like the right time. And what people didn't understand, and the people on the board, we had a couple of financial institutions who had backed us, and our numbers were not glowing from a financial institution perspective. And I said, it's not about that, it's about the platform. And we've built this platform. We have a cool brand. We were known for doing cool stuff. Somebody could take this platform and do more with it. And to be very honest, I thought there would be much greater interest than there was. We did have a couple of offers, but ultimately the best offer was to this rather unpleasant individual named David Bergstein, who was looking to build a international mega company using Wall Street money, which, was interesting for me to see how that game was played. And this was in 2006. And when the collapse happened in 2008, you realized that it was just moving. Like I said, I just learned a whole lot about my experience from when the world collapsed in 2008. So it wasn't real. It was just using money. People with money needed to deploy money. People with somewhat questionable ethics who knew how to extract that money from those who had to deploy it. And luckily, and people said to me, actually, knowledgeable, good people said to me, you can't do business with this guy. You can't sell him your company. And I said, well, if the check clears, I'll stay in business with him according to my agreement. And if it doesn't clear, we'll just get back on that path that was there before. And the check cleared. 10% was held back. And 5 days before that holdback money was supposed to come out, he sent a letter to the trust company and said they've committed fraud and misrepresentation, and that money got frozen for a 3-year legal battle, which we ultimately got because, as I like to say, I was hoping it would end up in court because all I wanted to do is say, the owner of the company accused me, the CEO, of fraud and misrepresentation, and I continue to work there and I continue to have check signing authority.
Right.
That would have been the end. I just wanted to testify along and just to say nothing else.
I love it.
Right?
Well, there's a New York Times article that we read in preparation for chatting with you today that referenced Think Film, saying that the alumni of your team there went on to become these incredible forces throughout the industry. And what was it about that company? What was it about that time? People that are all over the place now doing awesome things. Curious on your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's great. And again, I think we had a culture, Andre Link, who is my mentor and had the company called CFP, which I joined and grew. And then we ultimately sold it to what became Lionsgate. He never coined it this way. He described it this way and I coined it. And it was a horizontal org chart as opposed to a pyramid org chart. So I never felt that anybody was above anybody else. We all existed on a horizontal plane and everybody had specific responsibilities along that plane. Some of my responsibilities were consistent with that of the person who sits on top of the pyramid chart, work structure. But you don't want to use that if you don't have to. I never wanted to be anybody's boss. I hate the term boss. I hate hierarchy. I hate formal structure. I like putting together a group of people who all like hanging with each other and want to accomplish a common goal. And either that came through in who we hired, or they bought into it, or it was just in the ethos. But effectively, that was it. And Daniel Katz, who went on to start A24 after leaving us and spending 5 years at Guggenheim, I think is the best example of that. And his sidekick is David Finkel, and other people that work for us work there too. And, you don't read a whole lot about Daniel Katz in the trades. He's not promoting himself. It's just let the company do what it does and achieve great things. And I think what they did, which is really impressive, is they had access to capital. But it was the same philosophy, which is find cool, edgy films that we could target, and we could do it differently than how everyone else is doing it, which is throwing a lot of advertising money. Years ago, as a quick aside, if this was a marketing one, I used to say I never understood newspaper advertising because we're paying in the art film, independent film world. In the studio world, it makes sense. We're paying the same line rate and hoping 1 out of 1,000 people go. It's such an ineffective path to our customers.
Right.
And we just did it like lemmings. And so, I think one of the cool things that A24 has done is they don't do that. They target. Now, again, we didn't have the same opportunity in those days. But so I think it's pretty cool, that also the Lionsgate alumni, Joe Drake and Tom Ortenberg and all these guys. And I think a lot of it was the same thing. Mike Pasternak, we never functioned in a strict, traditional hierarchical way. It was just do cool stuff without ego as much as possible, and be fair, be reasonable, be sensible.
Yeah,
and I think it's kind of nice to see that. Yeah.
Well, I know you have a hard out here in a couple minutes, so I just want to ask maybe 1 or 2 more things.
Sure.
You've now reinvented yourself yet again, which you've done several times in your career, which is awesome. and you have a new company, Quiver, with your colleague Barry Meyerowitz.
Yes.
You've worked with Barry a bunch over the years, and you've both had these awesome multi-chapter stories.
Yeah.
You see another opportunity, another market lapse, another area to take advantage of?
So it's an interesting time. So Barry had a company so after I sold Think Film, I basically went on my own for about 8 years, and that's when I met you. Working out of my house, just doing deals, helping producers put financing together, setting up worldwide sales and other similar type things, activities. And I was on a lot of boards. Barry's was called Phase 4. And ultimately, he sold to E1, and he became the head of E1's. I was on the board. It's a cute story, actually. I was on the board because we were friends. And one day he said to me, I want you to join the board. And I said, okay. And he said, but I want to pay you so it'll seem like a regular thing, like a real job, not just as a friend. I said, okay. And he goes, how much do you think? I said, I don't know, $5,000 a month. Because I was thinking more like $1,000 a month. I said, okay. I said, but it's going to be $1,000 a month. I'm only going to invoice you twice a year. I don't want to get $1,000 a month. So, so I went on his board, and we're just good friends. And then I was doing my own thing, and he sold to E1, and he did not like I'm just a cog in this bigger machine, and they didn't endorse what he thought was capable. And again, their primary agenda was not independent films. And so after a couple of years, I said, let's just do this together. Let's just do more of what I'm doing. And timing is everything. The world changed. Netflix went from licensing more to manufacturing more. Sony worldwide was a big customer of mine and sold them a lot of films. We did a lot together, and all of a sudden they were doing a lot less of that, which is a whole other podcast about the ripple effects of the evolution of Netflix. Sony's output deals worldwide were curtailed somewhat by Netflix's evolution, which rendered their interest in my type of product somewhat less. So we started to just sort of help put productions together. First year we did 11. Then we came up with this idea for Quiver Capital, which is to lend against Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Showtime paper so that producers don't have to wait 2 years to get paid. We offered more competitive rates than some of our colleagues doing similar things. And so we started that business. And then Barry always wanted to do the distribution business, which is essentially the premium video on demand. We don't want to go back into the theatrical business other than as a support mechanism for VOD. We think there's a attractive moment of opportunity. Now it's going to become much more challenging given the flow of new product, but product gets manufactured somehow and it needs to find its way to consumers. And there's a number of companies who are effectively doing the same thing: Vertical, Grindstone, Saban, Screen Media, RLJ. It's all basically the same thing. It's not overly complicated. What's complicated is hitting the marketing right. And you saw the headlines, Capone with Tom Hardy, just did an amazing run this weekend. We have a great film coming out called Becky with Kevin James that hits 2 weeks from today. But our little marketing twist is that the drive-in theaters are going to play this film like a major league first run release because it has drive-in written all over it. The drive-ins have been getting a lot of noise. We say, we've got this film. We could just put it out in a couple of screens as people do. But let's go bigger. So you're going to read articles in the next couple of weeks about the biggest drive-in release, first run drive-in release ever. So we're going to continue to do that. We were looking to get involved in pre-buying rights so that we could help the films get made and then control its destiny. And so that's a distribution run. And then we started another Quiver company just a couple of weeks ago called Quiver Entertainment, which did a business deal that you would also find interesting on a whole different level. Than it's just it's film product, film and TV product. But we bought a pile of assets out of a bankruptcy of a company called Q Media, which has got, a bittersweetness to it because it's really sad to see. But we took advantage, we dove in, and we acquired these rights, and now we're going to exploit those rights and decide what to do, whether it becomes another platform for doing more and different things. So we're active and reinventing all the time, and very proud of being able to continue to do that. And hopefully one day there will be another American Psycho on my resume, because it's tough to think that, your crowning glory is 20 years old.
Well, I mean, look, I think film is a crowning glory, and being able to constantly stay relevant in this business. Yeah, I mean, I'm only 32 years old, but I can say I feel like I'm already on multiple chapters down the road because of how fast this industry is moving with technology.
Well, I'm always very proud of you, Matt, and I think you're going to continue to do great because you've got the right attitude and philosophy, and that's a core ingredient that you can't learn in school.
Jeff, thank you again for carving out the time. I know you've got to jump to a call.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Matt. Take care, man.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Greenlit, the Buffalo 8 podcast. For financing questions, feel free to contact us at BondIt Media Capital at info@bondit.us. For production, development, and distribution questions, feel free to contact us at Buffalo 8, info@buffalo8.com. We'd love to hear from you and hope you'll continue listening to the podcast episodes ahead.